What if you inherited a house and found a locked basement room no one was supposed to see? Inside, a single word carved into the floor: help. I never thought much about my Uncle Raymond. Growing up, he was the kind of relative you saw at weddings and funerals, tall, awkward, always hovering near the coffee urn like he wanted to be anywhere else. My dad never spoke about him, except once, when I was 12, and I overheard them arguing in the garage. Dad's voice was low but sharp. You can't keep living in that damn house, Ray. People talk. I never knew what he meant. Raymond died in February, alone in that same house on Waverly Street. The coroner said it was a heart attack. No foul play, no suspicious circumstances, just old age catching up. I would have left it at that, except a month later, a letter arrived from a law office in Hollow Creek, the small town where he'd lived his whole life. I'd been named the sole heir to his estate. The will was read in a cramped room that smelled faintly of mildew and burnt coffee. The attorney, a stooped man with silver hair, Caldwell, shuffled papers, while I tried to make sense of why Raymond would leave me anything. We'd barely spoken in 20 years. There is one stipulation, Caldwell said, adjusting his glasses. You must take possession of the property in person. Spend at least one night there before the transfer is finalized. Why? I asked. He hesitated. It was Mr. Raymond's request. A personal tradition, he said. Something about the way Caldwell avoided my eyes made my stomach tighten. That night, I drove to Waverly Street. Hollow Creek was the kind of place where the gas station doubles as a diner, and the same rusty pickup truck had been parked outside the grocery store for so long. It might as well be a landmark. The house sat at the far end of the street, isolated from its neighbors by overgrown hedges. It was a hulking Victorian, the paint faded to a tired grey, its windows reflecting the last light of the setting sun like watchful eyes. The porch sagged under its own weight, and the front door bore a tarnished brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and something else, faint but unmistakable. A metallic tang, like old coins or dried blood. The first floor was exactly what you'd expect from an elderly man's home. Outdated furniture, a television from the 90s, stacks of newspapers neatly tied with twine. But as I explored, I noticed something odd. Every interior doorway to the kitchen, the study, even the bathroom, had an old-fashioned keyhole lock. And every lock had been recently oiled. Upstairs, I found Raymond's bedroom, neat to the point of obsession. The bed was made with military precision, the dresser drawers lined with paper, each shirt folded identically. But it was the closet that caught my attention. The back wall wasn't flush. A narrow seam ran vertically along the paneling, and when I pressed it, I felt a faint give. It didn't open, not then, but I knew I'd be back. I settled on the couch downstairs for the night. The wind outside rattled the windows, and somewhere in the house, I swore I heard the sound of a door creaking open. Around midnight, unable to sleep, I wandered into the kitchen for water. That's when I saw it, a door I hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind the refrigerator. It led to a set of narrow stairs going down. The basement smelled damp, like stone and earth. My flashlight being cut through the darkness, revealing shelves of canned goods, jars of nails, and boxes labeled in my uncle's cramped handwriting. At the far end was a wooden door, reinforced with a heavy iron bolt. The bolt was unlocked. When I pulled the door open, the temperature dropped several degrees. The room beyond was small, with concrete walls and no windows. A single bare bulb dangled from the ceiling. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair. Strapped to the chair was a set of leather restraints, wrists, ankles, chest. Old, cracked, but unmistakably functional. And carved into the floor, in uneven letters, "Help me." I stood there for a long time, the flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The concrete floor was cold under my feet, but my skin prickled with heat. The words, "Help me," looked old, the edges of the letters softened by time and damp air. I crouched to get a better look. The carving wasn't deep, but the lines were jagged, as though whoever made them had been working fast or under duress. I traced the grooves with my finger and felt tiny splinters of wood caught in the concrete, like someone had used a broken piece of furniture or even their fingernails. The chair was worse up close. The leather straps were stiff, cracked, but still solid enough to hold someone. The buckles were heavy brass, dulled with age, but functional. I touched one and imagined the sound it would make snapping shut. On the floor beside the chair, I noticed a stain, dark, irregular, and long absorbed into the porous concrete. I told myself it was oil, rust, anything but what I really thought. I forced myself to search the rest of the room. Against the far wall was a low shelf, and on it sat a tin box with a faded label, property of R.L. my uncle's initials. Inside, I found 3 Polaroid photographs, each slightly blurred, as if the camera had been moved at the last second. They all showed the same scene, the chair in this room, the same straps, but empty. In the corner of each photo was a blurry shadow, human-shaped but indistinct. There was also a folded piece of lined paper, yellowed with age. In shaky handwriting, it read, "If you're reading this, you found the room. Leave now. Don't dig, please, no signature." I sat back on my heels, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know whether to believe what I was seeing or chalk it up to some bizarre hobby, an eccentricity gone too far. But that metallic smell, it was stronger down here. Then, a sound from upstairs. A single, deliberate footstep. They all had one thing in common. The last confirmed location was always within a 2-block radius of my uncle's house. I wrote down the names: Marilyn Keats, 24, Darren Phelps, 17, Gary Hobbs, 39. When I went to put the reel away, something caught my eye. A short police notice from 1998. It mentioned a search of the Waverly property in connection to an ongoing investigation. No details, no charges, but the name in the article was clear as day: Raymond L. Calloway. Back at the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The curtains in the living room had been drawn when I left. Now they were open. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Though I hadn't smoked a day in my life, I decided to check the basement again. The reinforced room looked the same: the chair, the carving, the tin box. But on the floor, under the chair, was something new, a small envelope. Inside was a strip of photo negatives. Holding them to the light, I saw blurred figures, 2 men, one taller, one shorter, standing in what looked like this very basement. Between them was someone sitting in the chair. The image was too grainy to make out their face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt deliberate, every shadow too long. Around 3 heard the sound again, a single footstep upstairs. I grabbed my phone and quietly started recording. The sounds moved slowly from the hallway to the top of the basement stairs, and then stopped. When I finally worked up the nerve to check, there was nothing. Nothing except a fresh set of muddy footprints on the kitchen floor, leading from the back door straight to the basement door. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep piecing this together alone. Someone in Hollow Creek had to know more, maybe even be willing to talk. At the library, the old librarian gave me a name: Eleanor Bryce, she whispered. She used to rent the upstairs apartment in Ray's house, left in '97, and never came back. Said she saw something she shouldn't have. Eleanor lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, the yard overrun with weeds. She answered the door wearing a faded cardigan and a wary expression. "You're Ray's nephew," she said immediately. Not a question. "Yes. I was hoping to ask you about—" "I don't talk about that house," she interrupted, starting to close the door. I stepped forward just enough to keep her attention. "I think my uncle was involved in the disappearances in the '90s. I've been in the basement." Her face went pale. "You went in the room?" "Yes." She looked past me. scanning the street as if afraid someone might be watching. Then she opened the door wider. "You'd better come in." We sat at our kitchen table, the air thick with the smell of black coffee and dust. Eleanor wrapped her hands around her mug and stared into it as she spoke. It was the summer of '97. I came home late from work one night, maybe close to midnight. I heard voices downstairs, Ray's and another man's.